1:15 p.m. This is the Sri Lanka Broadcasting Corporation. The news edited by Romesh Piris and read by Geethanjali Ramanayaka. The headlines. The global lenders decide on a coordinated assistance program to recover Sri Lanka from the economic crisis. Lifts all COVID-19 restrictions for arrivals. Pafrel warns to take legal action if the local authorities' elections are delayed. Flight operations are expected to resume at the Jaffna International Airport from next Monday. The High Commissioner of Sri Lanka to India meets the Indian Finance and Corporate Affairs Minister to discuss multifaceted economic integration. A stock of medical aid worth over 2 billion rupees donated by China reaches the island. The annual Sripada pilgrimage season begins today. International news, the World Bank debt report says the poorest countries spend over a tenth of their export income to service external debt. Sports cricket, 2 more 2022 Lanka Premier League games will be worked off in Hambantota today. News in detail. Representatives of the global lenders World Bank, Asian Development Bank, International Monetary Fund and Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank have decided that coordinated assistance program supported by the multilateral financial institutions is required for Sri Lanka to recover from the economic crisis the country is currently facing. They reached the agreement following a lengthy roundtable discussion held yesterday with President Ranil Wickremesinghe in Colombo, where the latter presented Sri Lanka's development program associated with economic recovery and growth along with a vision for a long-term development. The President presented the program at the roundtable discussion in his capacity as the Minister of Finance, Economic Stabilisation and National Policies. Following the detailed discussion, it was agreed that a coordinated assistance program supported by the multilateral financial institutions is vital for Sri Lanka to recover from the present economic difficulties. The Executive Director of People's Action for Free and Fair Elections, Rohana Hettiarachchi, says the National Election Commission and the government must take necessary measures to conduct the local authorities' election before the end of February. Speaking during a media briefing in Colombo, Hettiarachchi said if the election is not conducted before the end of February, they will take legal action. He also said Pafrel met with the Prime Minister, who is also the Minister of Provincial Councils and Local Government, and requested him to take steps promptly to conduct the local authority election. Rohana Hettiarachchi also stated that they will take legal action if any steps are taken to delay the conduct of the election. The High Commissioner of Sri Lanka to India, Milinda Moragada, has met with the Finance and Corporate Affairs Minister of India, Nirmala Sitharaman, on Tuesday in the latest of a series of meetings since November last year on Indian economic cooperation and assistance to Sri Lanka in the context of the present crisis. At the outset, High Commissioner Moragada briefed Minister Sitharaman on Sri Lanka's ongoing discussions with the International Monetary Fund and the present status of the country's debt restructuring process. He also briefed her on the drastic impact the present economic contraction is having on the poor and vulnerable segments of the population of Sri Lanka. High Commissioner Moragada and Minister Sitharaman also reviewed the status of bilateral economic cooperation, and the High Commissioner emphasized that India could play a critical role in Sri Lanka's economic revival through multifaceted economic integration between the two countries by enhancing investments, tourism and trade. A stock of essential medicines and medical supplies donated by China has arrived in the island. The Chinese embassy in Sri Lanka said the shipment of 2 billion rupees arrived in Sri Lanka yesterday. The embassy noted that the shipment was transported in 24 containers that contained a total weight of over 255 metric tons. China has donated medicines and medical supplies amounting to 5 billion rupees to Sri Lanka since June this year. This news broadcast comes to you from the Sri Lanka Broadcasting Corporation. The annual Sripada pilgrimage season begins today. The casket of relics and statue of God Sumanasaman were taken from the Kalpottavala Sri Pada Rajamaha Viharaya to the Sri Pada Maluwa to commence the season. Accordingly, the pilgrimage season runs from today to next year's Vesak Poya Day. The Ministry of Buddha Sasana said all traditional customs and rituals connected to the annual Sripada pilgrimage season will be performed under guidance of the Sripada Sthanadipati Sabaragamwe Chief Sanganayaka and Chancellor of the Uwavellas University, Venerable Bengamwe Sri Dhammadinna Thero. Health guidelines are strictly adhered to prevent the spread of COVID-19. The Ceylon Electricity Board will impose 1-hour power cuts in all residential areas today. The Public Utilities Commission of Sri Lanka said it approved only a 1-hour power cut owing to today being a poor day. Accordingly, power cuts will be limited to between 3 p.m. and 6 p.m. today for groups A to L and P to W. And that ends local news for now.
The main news story is brought to you by Siddhalepa Vedamahatmya.
The Ministry of Health has lifted all restrictions imposed during the COVID-19 pandemic on persons arriving in the country. The Director General of Health Services said in a statement, persons entering the country via any airport or seaport will no longer be required to present a COVID-19 vaccination certificate. The Health Ministry imposed several restrictions on arrivals at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, including the requirement to present a negative COVID-19 test before boarding a flight to Sri Lanka and the requirement of COVID-19 vaccination certificate. However, all such requirements have been removed by the Director General of Health Services effective immediately. And that was our main news story.
The main news story was brought to you by Siddhalepa Vedamahatmya.
Watch Life is brought to you by
Celebrate Christmas and New Year with lots of CIB discounts. Valuable gifts with bank discounts till 31st of December. Come to CIB today.
On to Watchlight, the Lady Ridgeway Hospital consultant pediatrician Dr. Deepal Pereira says more than 12,000 children are currently being abandoned in orphanage homes because their parents are drug addicts, and most of them received hospital treatment without their parents due to abuse incidents. He said that most of the children come to hospitals with their grandparents because their parents are drug addicts. The consultant pediatrician expressed that the trend of all drug-related addictions among school children is more dangerous than any existing terrorism. He added, crystal methamphetamine, commonly known as ice, is spreading rapidly among the student community. He warned if this menace spreads, there won't be a next generation to take on the responsibilities of the country. Dr. Pereira stressed that the maximum punishment should be given to people who sell drugs and also to those who buy them. And that came to you in Watchlight.
Celebrate Christmas and New Year with lots of CIB discounts. Valuable gifts with bank discounts till 31st of December. Come to CIB today.
World News. Brought to you by courtesy of...
We give you the strength to rise higher and higher.
Never step back, but always march forward.
Empowering you to reach greater heights. People's Leasing, the trusted leader.
World News headlines. The World Bank debt report says the poorest countries spend over a tenth of their export income to service external debt. Democrat Raphael Warnock wins Georgia runoff election. And Australia fines Uber $14 million for misleading on fares and cancellation fees. The World Bank said in its annual international debt report, the poorest countries in the world now spend over a tenth of their export income on service external debt, the highest proportion since 2000. The debt overhang is larger as countries slide down the wealth scale, with the poorest countries increasing their debt over the past decade at a much faster clip than other economies. External debt doubled to $9 trillion among developing economies, but members of the International Development Association, the World Bank's arm set to help the poorest countries, soared to $1 trillion. World Bank Group President David Malpass in a statement, the debt crisis facing developing countries has intensified and a comprehensive approach is needed to reduce debt, increase transparency and facilitate swifter restructuring. Democratic U.S. Senator Raphael Warnock has won re-election in a hard-fought Georgia runoff, expanding his party's razor-thin majority as he turned back a challenge by Republican former football star Herschel Walker, with 97% of the expected vote counted and Warnick commanding a lead of 50.6% to 49.4%. Edison projected that Warnick had won re-election. Warnick's victory cements Georgia as a battleground state certain to play a prominent role in the 2024 presidential election. Democrats have now won 3 Senate races in the past 2 years in the former Republican stronghold, and Democratic President Joe Biden carried the state in 2020. An Australian court has fined Uber Technologies Incorporated $14 million for threatening cancellation fees it never charged and overstating fare estimates on some rides. The penalty was less than a regulator wanted. The federal court ruled the Australian arm of the US ride-sharing app maker broke consumer law by misleading customers with warnings they would be charged for cancelling some rides from 2017 to 2021 and by using an inaccurate software algorithm to estimate fares for a taxi service it offered until August 2020. Back to the headlines of the world news. The World Bank debt report says the poorest countries spend over a tenth of their export income to service external debt. Democrat Raphael Warnick wins Georgia runoff election. And Australia fines Uber $14 million for misleading on fares and cancellation fees. And that ends World News.
World News. Brought to you by courtesy of...
Amidst all challenges, we will rally around you and advance.
In the face of hardships, let's stand strong together.
Empowering you to reach greater heights. People's Leasing, the trusted leader.
On to development news. Flight operations are expected to resume at the Jaffna International Airport from next Monday. Preparations are being made to commence flight operations between Jaffna and Chennai, India, from next week. The Palale Airport was redeveloped and named the Jaffna International Airport in October 2019 by the then Good Governance government. The first international flight to land there was from Chennai, and India's Alliance, a wholly owned subsidiary of Air India, operated 3 weekly flights from Chennai to Jaffna. And that came to development news. And now moving on to sports news. It's first cricket, LPL 2022. Defending champions Jaffna Kings began their title defence with a comfortable win over the Galle Gladiators in the Lanka Premier League 2022 on Tuesday. After being bowled out for 137, the Jaffna Kings restricted the Galle Gladiators to 113 for 9 in their 20 overs. In other LPL contests, riding on Andre Fleischer's unbeaten century and Mandu Hasranga's 4 for 14, Kandy Falcons beat Colombo Stars by 109 runs in the Lanka Premier League. After posting a mammoth total of 199 for 1, Kandy Falcons bowled out the Colombo Stars for 90 runs in 14.3 overs. Meanwhile, Gladiators will take on Kandy Falcons in the second game of the day today. It is scheduled to get underway at the same venue at 7:30 p.m. In the FIFA World Cup 2022 news, Portugal coach Fernando Santos dropped Cristiano Ronaldo to a bench for the last 16 meeting with Switzerland and was rewarded replacement Goncalo Ramos and a stunning team display. Santos expressed his displeasure at gestures made by Ronaldo when he was substituted in the last group game against South Korea, and it was the first time in 31 games stretching back to 2008 that he has not started in major tournament. Meanwhile, Ashraf Hakimi made himself a hero with a chipped winning penalty as Morocco stunned Spain in a shootout after a goalless draw to reach the World Cup quarter-finals. The two teams played out a draw after 120 minutes and Spain failed to convert any of their 3 penalties. Education City Stadium was filled mostly by Morocco fans, went wild at the final whistle as their side reached the last 8 for the first time, where they will face Portugal or Switzerland on Saturday. And that ends sports news.
The fastest way to earn the highest interest. An interest rate of 22% in 4 months. NSB, the safest place for your money.
Business News. Sponsored by National Savings Bank. The safest place for your money.
The Embassy of Sri Lanka, in collaboration with Export Development Board, arranged the first ever participation of Sri Lanka business in the Vietnam Expo, which was held earlier this week at Saigon Exhibition and Convention Center in Ho Chi Minh City. This was the 20th edition of the Vietnam Expo. Representing Sri Lankan businesses, Hemas Manufacturing Private Limited, Ceylon Fresh Trees Private Limited, Ceylon Biscuits Limited, Kalini Cables PLC, Oral Corporation Private Limited, and SME companies with Healthy Foods Lanka Exports Private Limited, Kanrikti Beverages Lanka Limited, Dahemi Products and Successful Holdings Private Limited participating in the expo. The Sri Lankan businesses received well over 100 trade inquiries and held a large number of business meetings with interested parties. Being the biggest trade expo, Vietnam Expo consisted of approximately 550 stalls with representation from 20 countries and 13,000 visitors. And that was Business News.
Business News. Sponsored by National Savings Bank, the safest place for your money.
The fastest way to earn the highest interest, an interest rate of 22% in 4 months. NSB, the safest place for your money.
Economic news, courtesy of...
For the 5th consecutive year, LOLC is awarded People's Financial Services Brand of the Year at the 2022 Slim Kantar People's Awards. As the People's Financial Services Brand of the Year, LOLC continues to place the customer first, and this has won the hearts, minds and trust of Sri Lankans, with yet another prestigious award as proof of this lasting commitment. LOLC. Imagine the possibilities.
A total of 28,473 Sri Lankans have left to take up employment overseas in the month of October. According to Central Bank of Sri Lanka data, among them 11,399 were unskilled workers, while 7,887 were skilled workers. 6,165 persons have left the country to work as domestic helpers. Accordingly, 251,151 individuals have left the country between January and October to take up employment overseas. The Central Bank said this year's figures are higher than the annual numbers reported before the COVID-19 pandemic. That was economic news.
LOLC Finance is taking the power of innovation to the next level, winning 5 golds at the Technovation Awards 2022, leading the digital revolution with cutting-edge interbanking digital payments. LOLC Finance claims the overall gold award, whilst also claiming an extraordinary victory in digital banking. LOLC Finance will continue to innovate with the next generation digitalization of financial services, delivering a superior customer experience.
The Department of Meteorology forecasts the depression located over the southeast Bay of Bengal is likely to move west-northwestwards and intensify gradually into a cyclonic storm this evening. The system is likely to approach the coast of North Tamil Nadu, Puducherry and South Andhra Pradesh over the southwest Bay of Bengal tomorrow. The Met Department said cloudy skies will prevail over most parts of the island today. It added showers will occur at times in the northern and north central provinces and in the Trincomalee district. Fairly heavy rainfall above 75 millimeters can be expected at some places in the northern province and the Trincomalee district. The Met Department also added that strong winds about 40 to 50 kilometers per hour can be expected at times over the northern, north central and eastern provinces. That was the weather report, and now back to the headlines to conclude the news broadcast. The global lenders decide on a coordinated assistance program to recover Sri Lanka from the economic crisis. The Minister of Health lifts all COVID-19 restrictions for arrivals. PAFREL warns to take legal action if the local authorities' elections are delayed. Flight operations are expected to resume at the Jaffna International Airport from next Monday. The High Commissioner of Sri Lanka to India meets the Indian Finance and Corporate Affairs Minister to discuss multifaceted economic integration. A stock of medical aid worth 2 billion rupees donated by China reaches the island. The annual Sripad pilgrimage season begins today. International news, the World Bank debt report says poorest countries spend over a tenth of their export income to service external debt. Sports cricket, 2 more 2022 Lanka Premier League games will be worked off in Hambantota today. And with that, we end this news broadcast from the Sri Lanka Broadcasting Corporation.